Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this December 21st, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's Pacific time on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. This show is a special broadcast coming from Rome, Italy. My guest is Leo Zagami, and we're going to spend the show talking about a name that may not be familiar with Americans, but it's a name that you should know. Licio Gelli, who was a Masonic Grand Master of the P2 Lodge, died last week. He was 96 years old. And Gelli's story takes us all the way back to the 1980s when I was a journalist in Rome, through that period of strategy of tension, through that period of time when the CIA was working together with the Vatican and this lodge to basically create terrorism. So what happened was the name Gelli back then, even for me as a journalist, was kind of hidden to the media. And I didn't really get to understand who he was until I met Leo Zagami about 10 years ago, who had personal information about him and actually talked so much about this story that I really believed what Leo was saying was true, because I was there myself, saw it with my own eyes, was there during the strategy of tension. Even, remember we talked about a week ago, I was telling you about the time I was almost blown up in a newspaper?
Yeah.
And I pulled the UPI story, and that was part of the strategy of tension. So I thought we'd dedicate the show to you Americans who don't understand how this really operates in Italy. Now, the French have a very interesting expression. They call it an Italian scandal. Now, to the French, this means this. This means a scandal or plot that is so complex or tangled, it defies understanding and really never gets solved. But here we're going to understand it today with Leo. So, Leo, good to have you again. Great to see you and talk to you, but tell me let's go back to those days when you knew Gelli and when you kind of divorced yourself from this group. But tell us about who this man really was so people understand.
Okay, in the last 24 hours, I think the New York Times, if I don't get it, yes, the New York Times have dedicated an article by Sam Roberts to Licio Gelli entitled Licio Gelli, Italian financier and cabal leader, dies at 96. So we're talking here about a figure that is moving the highest, the most respected journalist in the world at the moment. They're trying to grasp who this guy really was, and they can really never go deeper, because the deeper you go is like the rabbit hole and Alice in Wonderland, and the deeper you're never going to get to an answer if you're not an insider, if you don't have the insider perspective. Now, I, as many of you know, in 1999 joined the Monte Carlo Lodge, which was originally a creation of William Rosati, passed on, and Licio Gelli, passed on to Ezio Giunchiglia. I went on being a member of this lodge, of which I was part for 7 years, basically. And in those 7 years, I also established the Ordo Illuminatorum Universalis, which was my own order of Illuminati within the Monte Carlo Lodge. But I was brought up in Arezzo in the late 80s. I actually worked for a guy called Romano Piergentili, who was a 33-degree Freemason and a Grand Master of the Knights Templar. Romano Piergentili was probably only second to Licio Gelli in influence in Arezzo at that time. And through common friends, at that time, a very young age, I met for the first time Licio Gelli, somebody that I will encounter during the course of my Masonic history a few times through common friends, people, of course. Being part of the Monte Carlo Lodge, we had a complete, let's say, loyalty to him as being one of the co-founders. And at the same time, Ezio Giunchiglia had grown wary and had created some conflicts with Gelli during the years, though both of them were working for the same people. So who these people are? And where did I end up really being? It's quite incredible, because I ended up being in a setup which you yourself were witness. Of course, you, Greg, were witness about these things. You were much older than me. I joined them much later because of my age.
Thanks for reminding me, Leo.
No, but I want to say it.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Experience as a journalist, because you were there as a journalist in Rome, probably at the most delicate time in recent history. And in those years, Licio Gelli's influence was probably even larger than it ever was in the last few years. What happened in the last few years is that gradually Gelli got isolated on one side. On the other, he saw many of the things that he also tried to implement with his famous Piano di Rinascita Democratica, his famous manifesto, and he saw them implemented by both Berlusconi, who, as we know, was a P2 member, and then later on in more recent years by Renzi, who is not a P2 member, but definitely comes from Tuscany and from, let's say, a milieu of people, Masonic milieu, that also saw some of Gelli collaborators. But he never really had any esteem or any for this recent Italian Prime Minister, which he judged even publicly as being basically an idiot, stating that he will not last as long as Berlusconi did for a number of reasons. In any case, Gelli in recent years, I think, also understood some of his mistakes and the fact that he trusted in the past the wrong people, that he became himself the easiest scapegoat for many things, that he didn't even have anything to do with some of them. Some of them, of course, yes, because he himself said, I am a puppet master. I'm not a puppet, I'm a puppet master. When you state, you make that public assertion that you are a puppet master, of course, people will say, but who was Licio Gelli? Licio Gelli was born in 1919. Licio Gelli was somebody who went through fascism with Mussolini, became an officer involved in a close relation also with the Nazis, so a liaison officer in the last part of the war. Then the day after the war ended, as you know, like many others, he joined the anti-communist establishment financed by the US and Operation Gladio. And
that's a key thing people have to understand, is that he was recruited by the CIA to start Operation Gladio, which was really to foment terrorism.
We can say that to start Operation Gladio is a bit saying a big thing, because Operation Gladio starts really a bit earlier with Frank Giotti and later on also Principe Alliata di Monreale. And then in the 50s, of course, they recruit also Gelli, when Gelli starts to become prominent as a businessman first. And then later on, he also gets recruited in the CIA for these anti-communist operations. Now, of course, he has done many wrong things. His lodge has indulged in many criminal activities. We have discussed this, I think, for how many hours in our shows in the past?
Well, 10 years ago, when people were shocked to hear this stuff, but hopefully they're understanding it a little better now.
Yeah, now the interesting thing is that Gelli at that time, was, of course, used by the CIA in this strategy of tension within the Cold War. Once the Cold War finishes, of course, things change. And with that probably started also the decline of, but also for a period there was a person from the P2 like Berlusconi maintaining those ideas, implementing those plans that Gelli had written down, that included also the control of the media and so on. But as I said, his plan was not of dictatorship, because he had already participated, and you probably will remember, in 1970 there was the attempted coup, the famous coup Borghese.
Mm-hmm.
And he was part of it, so he actually got even in trouble for this. And for this reason, he didn't want to make up a plan that was completely dictatorial for the future. And when in 1982, in a case that they found at the airport with his daughter Maria Grazia, which is the daughter of Licio Gelli, they found this plan, this secret plan called Plan of Rinascita Democratica. And it says in the words, Rinascita Democratica, meaning democratic renaissance. So what happens with the Rinascita Democratica? Means that actually he made an attempt to control everything, staying within the frame of so-called democracy. Demonstrating that democracy is still, of course, an illusion, because once you know that, then you understand also that, of course, it is an illusion. He made it very clear to the people that was an illusion when he said that you have to create two parties, one on the left and one on the right. At that time, remember, and you remember it very well, governments used to change it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we had a little internet interruption with this connection to Italy. So, Leo, you left off where you're saying governments were changing all the time back then, and I remember that.
TVs were opening up to the possibility of private ownership. I mean, you could finally not have only the monopoly of RAI and transmit freely, first by cable, then with an antenna. That also led to the phenomenon of Berlusconi's TV channels in the year that followed up. And Berlusconi was a P2 member. So he also implemented this part. We can say that the reduction of the parliamentary members he wanted to, or the abolition of the provinces, were also part of his plan. But in any case, here we are talking about a plan that Gelli definitely created, but that then was implemented by Berlusconi. And Berlusconi didn't necessarily always recognize him as his mentor. You understand? Because when you grow up yourself very strong, then at that point Berlusconi created his own lodge, the Lodge of the Dragon. So it's like when somebody becomes strong, maybe they create their own lodge, and at that point they can say, okay, I don't care about you, worship of master, I go on my own way, I do my own path, because of course he gained a lot of power. So I think that he suggested a lot than their own, and of course maybe his view of things then changed very much when he saw how they implemented it. He was definitely disappointed with the latest governments. What I noticed more is this fact that at the funeral there were probably more journalists than participants. This is Licio Gelli, a guy who dies at 96, and with all this background that goes through decades of influence and of power, in which, I have documents sent by Licio Gelli to Ronald Reagan. He was invited to the White House.
Yeah, I got pictures of him with Reagan, in fact.
Yes.
And so, something I wanted to mention so people understand this, when things really hit the fan in Italy, it was during that scandal with the Vatican Bank and P2 Lodge and Gelli and Michelle Sindona. Comment on how the Vatican gets involved in all this stuff.
The Vatican was always involved because, as you know, the link between a certain form of Freemasonry in Italy after the war, the same Freemasonry that was implemented by Frank Gigliotti, the same Freemasonry that saw my initiator. I was originally initiated by Prince Aliato di Monreale. Prince Aliato di Monreale was one of the key members of the P2, and then left the P2 even himself when he saw certain things that he didn't agree with and created his own branch. But we can say that the P2 was very influential with the secret services, because they had the leaders of the secret services, the generals of the various branches of the military. It had the key journalists, and in all this, the Vatican, of course, was linked to it through people like Marcinkus, who was a member of the P2 at the time.
Yes, I know.
Was, member of the Monte Carlo Lodge later on, but initially a P2 member, all'orecchio, as he used to say, because Gelli was very clever. He said, I'm not going to make only members initiated in a traditional way. Then he devised a very quick initiation whereby he will initiate them with the sword inside the Excelsior Hotel in Rome, very quickly, in 5 minutes, you'll be initiated, But there was also the fact that you could be initiated at the ear. So just by communicating to him that you believed in his principles, and if you were an influential person, at that point, Gelli will automatically bring you in. Then, of course, you will do an oath, but you will become a member. Members increase to such an extent that at one point they arrived to around 2,600 members, 2,547, I think, for sure. But in any case, the ones that were later then declared, the official members who in the list were finally found in Castiglione Fibocchi was only 900 and something. So 906. We're talking here about missing 1,500 names.
Mm-hmm.
Still now, the government doesn't want to release those names and pretends that the list is the original list, is only the one with the 900 names. I mean, I have documents in my hands which I published in volume 3 of my Confessions, in which I demonstrate that Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa, the general of the Carabinieri, was a P2 member. His oath, his membership card of the P2, and also I demonstrate in volume 3 of my Confession with the internal documents that there were 2,500 members. I mean, I demonstrate it because I have the documents to prove it. These documents were then secretate, meaning they were taken by the police during the police raid. You remember when in Castiglione Fibocchi they found the famous P2 list?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Then they were brought to Milan. At that point, the judges, the secret services, all the people involved, they viewed the material and they decided to release a list. They said, on the 17th of March 1981, in this factory of Licio Gelli in Castiglione Fibocchi, the magistrate, after the kidnapping of Michele Sindona, who after died in prison after poison with a coffee. You remember Michele Sindona in the 1981 or after later on. But at that time, when they took this list of members, it was publicized all over the press. They said, finally we have the list of all the members, blah, blah, blah. Everything came out. Oh, yes, yeah. Instead, it was a big lie because they took away 1,500 names. And I have a document in which the judges of Milan put a seal on it. They put a stamp. And in the stamp, then, it means they have viewed it, but then at that point it's reconsidered a secret. So it becomes top secret. So it's not that they got in their hands these members and then it was only 962 and that's it. Because Gelli got them only to view those. It was themselves who censored the 1,500 names. That's the crazy thing about it all. It's the state censoring himself.
And why do you think who are some of the prominent names they wanted to protect?
Everybody. Mm-hmm. We're talking here about the Vatican, you were saying, and in the Vatican you had the Lodge Ecclesia. But many of those members were also affiliates of the P2. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we had a guy like Mino Pecorelli who was killed, you remember, brutally killed. Mino Pecorelli was a member of the P2, used to print that OP magazine, right, which brought out the names of all the members of the Vatican Lodge.
Yeah, and also I remember the names about over 150 high-level priests being involved, back then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that list that came out with the priests was because of Mino Pecorelli, who was himself a P2 member. And for that reason, then it was actually Gelli who himself was ordered by Giulio Andreotti to ignore his request for protection, and then at that point Andreotti got him killed with one of these killers from the Banda della Maiana, who still today is one of the leading people in that famous scandal. In the last few months is brought out the mayor of Rome to resign. Carminati, who is known as the El Cieco in Rome, meaning the blind, because he has only one eye, is now arrested for the recent scandals, but he was the killer of Pecorelli, and Mino Pecorelli, and he wasn't arrested for that. He's been arrested now for other scandals, but he was able to work his way through the Roman mafia and establish what is now known worldwide as Mafia Capitale, the scandal of Mafia Capitale and the Roman mafia. And so these things are slowly coming out. In any case, other lists for a total of 550 names, of which only 180 appear in the first 962, later on kind of appeared publicly. But we are still missing a lot of names, and these names, of course, were also names of prominent members of other lodges, which they didn't want to be in any way touched by the scandal, because you had important transnational lodges like the Three Eyes Lodge, where Henry Kissinger operates, which, as you know, Gelli was working for both the CIA but also for Mossad. It had a very big link with Mossad and, of course, the Vatican, because Licio Gelli had also was nominated by the Pope Knight of San Silvestro Papa. He was also Knight of the Holy Sepulchre. He was very active, actually, in the knighthood of the Vatican. And I think that the problem with him is that he is covered. He went in his grave with his secrets, and I tried to convince in the last few months to actually come out with some of this stuff and be able. Yeah,
when was the last time you talked with him, when he was alive?
I wasn't able to talk in the last few years with him, but I was able only to deliver messages through other people, because also communication with him was completely sealed. You're talking about a guy who officially was under arrest. Okay,
that I wasn't aware of. Go ahead.
So he was officially under arrest, moving from one villa to the other. Usually he was in Villa Vanda, but then sometimes he was in other place, in Pistoia. But it was possible only to have contact with him through certain people, because having contact with him, as you imagine, with a person who is under arrest, under scrutiny still after all these years, was very particular. You had to organize yourselves. You had to, not have pigeons, but almost. You understand? I mean, we're talking about here a guy who inspired The Godfather Part 3. So, I mean, you're not talking about anybody. In the last few years, I had contact with him through the representatives of my order, one of them in particular who is from Arezzo, and is the son of Romano Piergentili, and who tried to get me always the latest news from him and everything. But the ones who really had official contact with him at the Masonic level was this Romanian Grand Lodge, and his Italian representative, who is also a member of my order, who ended up by chance becoming the guy who Gelli will leave his testament, because Gelli surprised everybody in the end.
Well, Leo, hold that thought, because we're going to take a break for our first half hour here, and then we're going to come back in 3 minutes. So I got a lot more, folks. We're going to talk to Leo about Gelli's last, what happened at the funeral, a number of other things. And I want to start the next half hour by stating that it isn't just as simple as good or evil here. This is a very complex system, and we need to understand it from the inside out. That's what we're doing here today. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased. It has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour on the Investigative Journal. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. We're talking to Leo Zagami from Rome, Italy, regarding the death of a Grand Master of the P2 Lodge. I know it well back when I lived in Italy and worked as a journalist, and probably one of the biggest Vatican scandals erupted, Gelli right in the middle of it, along with CIA connections, the P2 Lodge, connections to the Vatican, banks were folding. Roberto Calvi was found killed under the Blackfriars Bridge, dressed like a monk. Leo, the strategy of tension was high there at the time. We were witnessing, I think, and like I said, I was just a young journalist at the time, but I was witnessing how this whole system really operates. And you have connections with Kissinger, Reagan, you have connections to the Pope. And Gelli, of course, being recruited as an Italian who was very influential to make sure the ball kept rolling, correct?
Yes.
Where did that ball, how did it start rolling then, and where is it at now?
It started rolling, as I said, in the 50s. It kind of got more and more financing when he became the worshipper master of the P2. When he actually started to his process to become worshipper master of the P2, the financing started to pour in. And this financing was made available so the strategy of tension could keep Italy firmly in the hands of the NATO alliance. Mm-hmm. There was a threat, a threat that was the communist regime. Of course, that was itself a setup of the worldwide establishment. We saw how it fall down later on. But let's remember that at that time, of course, everybody was playing their parts. So the interesting thing is that now Gelli is dead. He has left us with something. He has just not left with the plan. The last few months, I was in contact with him through these people, and every now and then, I had this constant contact with him. I'm sorry that I didn't manage to actually meet him before he died. That's unfortunately, but he was very sick the last few months. Sometimes it was very difficult for him to also keep a very steady conversation, but he was still lucid until the end. And he nominated in June, he called in this Grand Inspector General, this 33-degree called Mariano Iodice, which is, by the way, also a member of my order, to give him a testament for General Bartolomeo Costantin Savoio, to appoint him as his successor. What does this mean for the world? It means that by doing this, Licio Gelli wanted to simply state to the world, I die under all this, pile of dirt that you have put on me, but I am nominating as my successor a 4-star general of NATO, one of the most respected ones, and he is embracing it in front of, he went in front of the cameras, made pictures with him, everything, and then this testament was given to Mariano Iodice, and it will be read publicly on the 22nd of December in Arezzo at 12 o'clock in the morning, and it will be definitely history in the making. History in the making also because there is a lot of interest on who is the legitimate heir of the P2. 10 years ago, as you know, I came out of it, so I couldn't really follow up and become his successor for a number of reasons.
Yeah, and I remember that story, and since then, what happens with this story, and I have to explain to American listeners, it's not as simple as it's not as cut and dry as you think. And what happens here is you have a lot of connections, and the only way a journalist can really get to them is by talking to everyone. We can't uncover secrets unless we talk to those who hold the secrets. And I think many people back then, when you said you came out of the order but then started something else, Americans took it like they would call me and go, you're nothing but more, you're just the enemy, Greg. You're just playing part, because you have Leo on the show. And so, it upset me a bit, and I think I made a mistake by cutting off relationships with you for a while, but I've since learned that it's important to understand your story because it's a bit different than most people think, and I think you came out of the order for legitimate reasons and wanted to do some good things, and it was misinterpreted. Go ahead.
Yes, it was misinterpreted, but at the same time, gradually, even Licio Gelli started to follow me, and he actually built in the last few years, believe it or not, more and more esteem towards my act of rebellion. Mm-hmm. I know this for sure as a fact because during the funeral, which I also sent a flower bouquet to it was given by one of my representatives to the widow was very thankful and acknowledged that. So you see, when you are in such a close contact with somebody you are reporting, and at the same time, here, I have also a background, as you know, I write nowadays, I publish books, I'm also a journalist from time to time, you are a journalist. Professor Mariano Iodice, who in June went to take this testament that will be read, and there will be also the presence of the general himself that we mentioned earlier on the 22nd, he himself is a journalist. So we are journalists, but we are not those journalists who don't want to understand. We are part, sometimes we enter the story, we become connected to it. I don't say that Greg entered any lodge or anything, because that would be a lie. Greg is simply somebody who is reporting it in the most biased possible way, and at that time, people could just not understand what I was doing because it was too complex for their mindset, because they always think as everything being black or white. Now,
I remember you were outing Licio Gelli. You were rebellious against what he did, and to see him come to terms with you, tell me how that happened.
Well, since I came back to Italy, gradually we reawakened the Ordo Illuminatorum Universalis, that, as you know, in 2008, probably when we last had contact, me and you, I later on came out completely of the Monte Carlo Lodge setup after a meeting that was held in the summer of in July 2008. Later on I was arrested for espionage in Norway, but before that I completely severed my links with these people, And I went, I brought my order and the people who were loyal to me on a different path. Gradually, though, this proves of actually dealing with the criminal side. We actually managed to get the criminal side of the P2 that was still operating with Giorgio Ugo Balestrieri arrested. He's in jail now. Do you know he's in jail now?
And I didn't know that because we did a lot on Balestrieri and
sure.
even his connections to 9/11, remember?
Absolutely. And Balestrieri was arrested a year ago in Morocco in November last year. Then he was extradited to Italy. He stayed in prison, of course, only until May because, he's Balestrieri. He was sent to house arrest now in Livorno. But he is under house arrest. He was able, though, for 5 years to dodge the authorities and to still be in charge of the Rotary Club in the United Nations, the International Rotary Club. That's crazy. And he actually had an Interpol thing issued for the whole of Europe. But he managed to escape because he has a passport with written instead than Giorgio Balestrieri, Giorgio Ugo Balestrieri. Mm. So he managed to escape. And I was a crook. And so then there was another crook which we used to talk about back in the days, Greg. I don't know if you remember another guy called Rui Gabiro.
Oh, yeah. What happened to him?
Also busted. His lodge was busted by the police. They proved that Amato and the other guys that were following him in Italy were actually gathering money for his militias that you remember were in Africa, his mercenaries and so on. And so basically he can't come back to Italy. He has an arrest warrant pending on him.
So what is house arrest in Italy? They put him in a villa and he...
No. We are talking here about people that, if you're not Licio Gelli and you are Rui Gabiro, I don't think you will have the same treatment as Licio Gelli. Licio Gelli wasn't somebody they were arresting for real. Licio Gelli was somebody they always arrested as a fictitious mean to then get the attention of the media off his back. Because simply he couldn't reveal those secrets because he was working for the CIA. He was, this guy, he was an official CIA appointed officer in charge of his operations. You can't arrest a guy who's doing his job. It doesn't exist. We are in NATO here. We're not in another part of the world. Mm-hmm. So he was operating legitimately. And that's the thing that we have to understand about this story. I was trying to explain this today to the journalist who interviewed me for this special made by the Italian radio, which interviewed Gelli's best friends, and amongst them Mariano Iodice, who picked his testament, Luca Monti, who was there at the funeral, who is a son of one of the main members of the P2. Then they interviewed also Benedetto Miseria, who is the appointed successor of Principe Alliata also, which was my initiator. So all these people who really closely linked to Gelli, who knew him, and they, of course, they choose also me, and that's one of the things that I was shocked, that the actual wife of Gelli would have preferred me to be there to deal with the press, because I probably at this point have the most clear idea of who really is Gelli. Mm-hmm. And so the misunderstandings outside there, of course, he was involved with this and this other. The tragedy Bologna, the many other accidents that happened during the strategy of tension, they always had members of the P2 operating within the intelligence, counterintelligence, Gladio, and subversive right-wing groups, or even left-wing groups like Brigate Rosse, manipulated by the same persons. But that doesn't mean that he was responsible, because he was simply doing his job. Mm. So it's I know it's hard to digest here for a lot of people, but at this point I go back to my old job. You remember my old job in the Monte Carlo Lodge? I'm an historian. Mm-hmm. That was I was known as the historian. So now that I write so many books, publish so many books, I'm actually regarded again as the historian. Mm. So, and this time I'm probably in a much wider way, because now I actually have the support of many people inside Freemason, inside these secret societies, that finally see that things need to be, exposed. Otherwise, you will be dealing in criminal activities. Mm-hmm. And if these things are not authorized by any means by intelligence agencies, and if they are, of course, then it's your decision if you want to compromise yourself or not. That's what happened really with me 10 years ago when I came out of all this, you remember? Because I didn't want to compromise anymore. Simple as that.
Yeah, and that's where, and then you fled the country, lived in Norway, got harassed there, came back, and so the story goes on. But take us right now to what's happening, at his funeral, and what's going to happen on the 22nd, and fill us in a little bit on what's going on with all these people in Italy and the CIA and the Vatican and everything. How have things changed, if they have?
Well, definitely they have changed very much because now in the Vatican you have the Jesuits in charge. Mm-hmm. And the Jesuits, they have their own agenda, as you know, their own liberal agenda, their own communistic agenda. They pull forward, they have pushed, and probably they have managed to accomplish what others haven't. They have now a party, which is the Democrat Party in Italy, which is the one that originally was Partito dell'Ulivo, and before that was the Communist Party in Italy.
You're not talking about the Christian Democrats. No, that's a difference.
Well, no, what they did is this. The Christian Democrats don't exist anymore. So what they did is they brought the Christian Democrat together with the old communists in one single party.
No, that's quite a mix.
That's a mix, because that is what we know as catto-communism. That it's a reality that really only exists in Italy, where they have the husband who is there with the red flag and the wife reciting the rosemary. This is the concept that was born in catto-communism. So this Italian reality that then manifests with, of course, a Bilderberg-controlled government. The first one was Mario Monti after Berlusconi was kicked out. We can say that after Berlusconi was kicked out, the technocratic synarchy of the European Union and the Bilderberg Club are being elected as Prime Minister. In fact, the first Prime Minister appointed after Berlusconi was Mario Monti, who is a member of the directive of the Bilderberg Club.
Now, Berlusconi, he was close to Gelli, wasn't he, too?
Yeah, the thing is this. Nowadays, you see, Greg, we have to be honest here.
Okay, go ahead.
The Italian lodges don't count anymore. Mm-hmm. Now there is the transnational lodges, the Bilderberg Club, the big international lodges have completely taken control of the whole thing. They don't even let you have your own independent setup in Italy because they don't want it. They want to implement a new world order, so they want to be in control. They don't want, a bunch of Italians who might have some crazy ideas to then implement their own thing.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So things around. It's not anymore your local P2 lodge that then became, because after the P2 there was the P3. Then there was the P4 with Bisignani. The scandals have been coming out, and of course in the newspapers the people were arrested for the P4 and for the P3. So I mean, these are not like abroad you don't get this information, but the P2 was only the beginning of a series of Ps. And of course, Gelli was the inspirational father, but he wasn't always the ultimate controller of the other ones that came into place. Mm-hmm. He was regarded more and more, from my point of view, I had a clear perspective, as an old sage in the last 10 or 20 years, gradually more and more an old sage and less an active manipulator.
Gotcha.
He was like the one you go to have the ultimate advice, kind of like a Pope of Freemasonry kind of thing, okay? Mm-hmm. But he wasn't the black Pope of Freemasonry anymore. Because nowadays, Italian Freemasonry that doesn't count anything anymore. We are our transnational lodges, like the Three Eyes Lodge, or other ones, out of Pentalpha and other ones, seem to have much more power at the moment than the P2 ever had. So, just to give you an idea, I think I explain you things quite clearly.
Right. So take us to now Gelli's funeral. You were a little it was kind of disappointing that not as many people came as you thought, right?
Absolutely. There were not many people, but I would like to read now the Founders Manifesto that Gelli wanted to leave to Freemasonry.
Okay, go ahead.
It's, of course, this... this information that I'm giving you, Greg, today is a real scoop. I mean, here we're talking about a real scoop. Meaning many journalists now, from The Guardian to the New York Times, everybody wants information on Gelli, but nobody can get where we are because, of course, this time, Greg, you have done the groundwork 10 years ago, and now you are privileged to see the next level, materializing. So what is this Founders Manifesto? Let's see what Gelli really wanted for the future of Freemasonry. It seems to me that this has many meanings of an esoteric kind, but you listen to it.
Okay, we have about 7 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay, from the most ancient times, the Mason constructors of the pyramids, temples, churches, or cathedrals have been faithful worshippers, believing in the Almighty God and erecting up their marvelous building with passion and love for God and human beings. Nowadays, we, the heirs of these operative workers, we become speculative Mason, erecting up our soul, temples, glorifying God, and doing incessantly efforts to be more tolerant, better citizen in our society, life, and closer to precepts of our religion. After centuries of misunderstanding, disputes, and false accusation, the time is arrived that we are declaring solemnly believing in the Almighty God, unique and merciful, the grand architect of the universe, Yahweh, Allah, Brahman, Bariswara. So it seems to me, I don't want to go on and on because otherwise we might waste more of your time, but I will read the last paragraph. We Freemason Christian worshippers are respectful. We Freemason Christian worshippers. So basically, it's changing. It's not anymore Freemason, Universal Freemason. He's changing the actual tenets of Freemasonry, adapting them to a Christian context. And if you go and see the work that General Bartolomeo Constantine Savoio has done in the last 3 years, let's remember who this guy was, so people Masonically speaking can understand what kind of guy this was. Here we have one of the highly decorated Freemasons of Europe. He was a member of the Grand Lodge de France, then he was a member of the Grand Lodge National de France, and at the highest level, he became the main inspirator for Freemasonry starting again in Romania, and of course with the Romanian National Grand Lodge 1880, he basically is the Sovereign Grand Commander and Grand Master, so both the Sovereign Commander of the Rite and also the Grand Master of the Order. We're talking here about the guy who has an organization specifically dedicated to Christian Freemasonry. So it seems to me that where this is going is leading towards orthodoxy. It's more leading towards orthodoxy than leading towards Catholicism, though in passage of this manifesto there is written, for us Freemason Christian worshippers, the God is the creator, for whom is proceeding Jesus Christ, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and we are venerating Virgin Mary. Now, by reading this, you understand that this is more really the belief of a Knights Templar than the one of a Freemason.
Right.
Because here you're putting really pinpointing on Jesus Christ. That is something that Freemasons after 1813 have not done anymore, because Freemasonry became a universal thing where you have to accept Jews, you have to accept Muslims, you have to accept this and that. It seems to me here that by going back to the Christian faith, bringing back Freemasonry to the Christian faith, there is a maneuver here to counteract what is happening in society, with the spread of the Islamization, with the spread of with the collapse of the Catholic world. Because let's remember that the Romanian Commander and Grand Master is under the Orthodox Church of his country. So he also has organized in recent years special meetings between the Orthodox churches of Romania, Bulgaria, and other countries, and then of course the Vatican. But we're talking here still of somebody is coming out of an Orthodox reality. So this is quite surprising that Licio Gelli, a member of the Vatican, knighthoods and this and that, that was involved so much closer with the Vatican, as you know, is now nominating as his successor an Orthodox.
Yeah, interesting.
It's very interesting, I think. And I think that there is a very big maneuver going on here that people should investigate further.
We only have a couple minutes, Leo. One question. You think ISIS will ever come to Italy?
unfortunately, there have been in the last 10 days already some attempts to trigger some terrorist attacks. In front of the church of Santa Maria Maggiore the other day, an Algerian and a Tunisian attempting to steal the machine gun of a soldier patrolling there, screaming Allahu Akbar, shouting Allahu Akbar. And they were fortunately stopped. But there was also at least 4 terrorist alarms on Rome in the last week.
Okay.
So, I mean, some of these alarms are not even communicated to the majority of the public to not make them even more tense than they already are. Otherwise, they will stop the whole festivities of Christmas, you understand?
Right. Well, listen, let's hold on to that. Yes. Let's hold on to that thought for another show because I'm running out of time. One last thought.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Well, listen, we got about 40 seconds here. You're going to be going somewhere on the 22nd. I want to know what happens over there when you go to, what are you going to be doing real quickly?
Quickly, well, on the 21st, today, Monday, I will be presenting my book in Perugia, in front also of a crowd of Freemasons and stuff. I mean, it's my latest version of Volume 1. And then on Tuesday, I will be in Arezzo, 12 o'clock, with the wife of Licio Gelli and with this general who has been appointed his successor for this press conference where we will see what happens. I mean, they will bring out also this document, very interesting document that Gelli left to the general. So I will let you know maybe at the next episode where it's all going.
Okay, Leo, well, listen. Okay, you take care. We'll talk again. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you guys for having me. And you see, more insight than this we can't get. So right inside news with me and Greg.
All right. Talk again, Leo. Bye.